Well, why don't we get started? So I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving and got some time to relax and reflect and spend some time with family. So we're going to finish this 5-part series about thriving outside of your comfort zone in our last section, part 5, which is removing self-beliefs. And I think actually this is the best part. So everything that we talked about in the first 4 sections, starting with how we're wired, physiology, how we're physiologically wired, all those components to it, how we're socialized, all that kind of builds up to this moment, right, where we're talking about how do we remove our self-limiting beliefs, because at the end, only by removing our self-limiting beliefs are we okay getting outside of our comfort zone. If you remember, we were talking about the four-stage pyramid of levels of competency, right? And we start off being unconsciously incompetent. We don't know what we don't know, but then we get all the way up to being unconsciously competent, which means it's all muscle memory. But once we reach that level where we're unconsciously competent, we're in a comfort zone. Okay. Question is, how long do we want to stay there? Now, for some things, maybe it's okay. For some things, not. But we start to move outside of our comfort zone when we start removing self-limiting beliefs, and self-limiting beliefs are just exactly what the title says. They are self-imposed. Okay. Nobody else put them on you. We put them on ourselves. And so everything we learned in sections, 1 through 4 was giving us the knowledge base so that we can now go into a phase where we are removing our self-limiting beliefs. And I always like this Henry Ford quote. I think it's one of my favorite quotes, is whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're always right. Okay. And that really is about self-limiting beliefs. And I always like this picture of Henry Ford. Look how bright his eyes are. I don't know how old he is in this picture, okay? But look how bright his eyes are. I think it's amazing. This is somebody who, like there's a sparkle there, okay? This is somebody who understood, okay, that the power of thought, and I always like that quote because of that. It's really the power of thought. So let's just talk real quick about Roger Bannister. Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile in 1954. And he, as you can see on the upper left-hand side of the screen, right, he broke it in 3 minutes, 59 seconds, 59.4 seconds. Now, here's the really fascinating part about the story. And we've used this before, so it might seem a little old, for some of you, so I apologize. But here's what's really fascinating about it. The reason why nobody broke the 4-minute mile before this is because the athletic community was told that it was physically impossible for the human body to break the 4-minute mile, and that we didn't have the heart or the lung capacity to run that fast. Then no one did it, right? It became a self-limiting belief. And since Roger Bannister did that, and this is an older number, so it might be more than this now, but over 1,400 people have broken the 4-minute mile since 1954. And so I think it speaks to a lot of what we know, right? People around us, people's opinions that we value, people's opinions maybe who are generally, more spot on. And we kind of absorb those opinions about what we can and can't do, when in essence it might not be right. And so we have to determine, okay, for ourselves, right, what we can do and what we can't do. And so just because someone says it's impossible, just because someone says, well, you can't do this, or that's never been done before, right? None of that matters. All right. I think it's kind of fascinating. You watch how space exploration now is being conducted, where the government, right, NASA is contracting with outside contractors, SpaceX and these other companies, to basically produce the space vehicles that we need, right, for the next part of our journey through space. And they've broken all the rules. Like they're doing things like they're not splashing down in the ocean. They're splashing down on, they're landing on fixed position pads, right? And making the rockets reusable, right? All these things that no one ever tried before, and all that, So no one ever told these corporations, right? These people with high creativity, that it couldn't be done. And it's just like Roger Bannister, right? And one of the interesting things about Roger Bannister is that every time he ran, he put a little slip of paper in his running shoes that said 3.59 minutes, right? And so he physically carried that thought with him, right? And that's really what limiting, getting beyond self-limiting beliefs is about. Okay, is don't listen to what anybody else tells you. Okay, follow your heart. Do the best you can. Okay, you don't have to follow convention. All right, now in some cases, following speed signs and things like that. There's certain things about convention that are healthy. Okay, but not always. And removing our self-limiting beliefs is as much about not listening to the people around us or the way we've been socialized. Okay, like I'm going to make this up. In my family, everybody's always done this. Okay, well, that doesn't mean you can't go do something else. All right. In my peer group, nobody in my peer group does yoga. Okay, well, that doesn't mean you can't go do yoga. Okay, and so it's about really not paying a whole lot of attention to how we were socialized. Okay, or what our current socialized peer group says we can or cannot do. Right. I just love that thing about Roger Bannister, that the medical community said, no, you can't do it. So let's spend a little bit of time talking about the ego, because I think the ego is it's a pretty good culprit, really. And of course, we could spend a lot of time talking about the ego. We could dedicate a whole thing about it. Maybe we should actually do a whole series on it. But the ego basically kind of just really gets in the way. It's really more of a spoiler than it is anything else. And if you go all the way back to, I think our second section in the series, we talked about fight or flight. The ego's primary responsibility had been, okay, it still functions this way, but kind of needlessly, is to basically protect us, right? So when we were in more dangerous times, we needed the ego, okay? We needed the ego because the ego really helped provide us with physical protection, okay? Like it put us above anything else, okay? And in today's environment, you don't really need that, okay? We don't have the same type of physical threats. So the way the ego has developed is that it basically serves as a self-protection tool, but in today's environment, less about self-protection in a physical sense, okay? Really more about self-protection and how we view ourselves, and that's how it's developed. So I'll give you a couple examples. So if I see myself, okay, as being non-athletic, okay, then even though being athletic, and I don't mean athletic like an Olympic athlete, okay, I'm just saying, just basic health, but the ego will then reinforce my view of myself, even though the view of myself, which is a self-limiting belief, even in this case, even if that view of myself is not in my best interest. See, the ego doesn't know the difference. You have to program the ego. So, different example. Nobody in my family has finished college. Nobody in my family has gone to college. Okay. That's a self-limiting belief. But if you adopt that self-limiting belief as a view of yourself, your ego will serve the purpose of reinforcing that view of yourself. I'm looking at Ara, right? People will say, I'm not artistic. Well, I don't know. Everybody's somewhat artistic. You can write, right? I mean, you can use a pen. So everyone's somewhat artistic. But if you said to yourself, I'm not artistic, your ego will absolutely reinforce that view of yourself. So the simple way to understand this is that the simple way to understand it is that the ego, okay, will be vigorously against, and I mean vigorously, against any change, positive or negative, if that change is in opposition to the view of yourself. And this is so critical to understand, okay? It's worth just saying again. The ego will be vigorously against any change, positive or negative, if the change is in opposition to the view of yourself. And it doesn't matter what the view is, because the ego is a self-construct. It doesn't matter. It doesn't understand the difference between good or bad, right or wrong, healthy or unhealthy. It doesn't make that determination. Okay. All it knows is that you've deemed yourself as being not artistic. And it will do everything it possibly can. Sabotage, subterfuge, fooling yourself. It'll do everything it possibly, tricking yourself, right? We'll talk a little bit about some ways that we get tricked, right? Tricking yourself. It'll do whatever it possibly can, because it's amazingly devious, the ego, to reinforce that view of yourself. And it absolutely does not know the difference between right or wrong, good or bad, healthy, unhealthy. It doesn't care about that. It's not its job, right? So it's the holiday season. And we can all trick ourselves. And I'm not saying we shouldn't do this, because I did this weekend. But, you know, we can all trick ourselves to having that extra piece of pumpkin pie with ice cream, because that's what I did. And we can all trick ourselves, because we can say, right, and the ego will come up with some creative way to convince you it's okay. Well, don't worry about it. You're going to go for a walk tomorrow, or don't worry about it. You're going to join the gym on, January 2nd, whatever the case may be. It will trick you, or go ahead and have that extra piece of, pie and ice cream, because tomorrow you're going on a fasting diet. You won't eat for a week. It'll come up with all these absurd ways, right, to convince you that it's okay, whatever it is. And, it's mostly all a lie, because the it only has a job. And like I said, it's ruthless about it. Absolutely ruthless. It takes no prisoners whatsoever. And so what we have to be aware of is that when the ego, we have to be able to identify, well, when is this the ego and when is this common sense or logic, because they're different, okay? And when that kicks in, I can tell you, I'm just coming off this sports injury, and it's just been, I've had it since July, and man, I tell you, my ego and I had some really tough conversations, because my ego was like, you're tired, you didn't sleep well last night, it's to my shoulder, so I can't sleep. And my ego is like, well, you'll feel better tomorrow, don't go to the gym this morning, all this type of stuff, and really it was just having like this argument with myself about, no, I'm going. Okay, I'll figure out, if I can't lift or whatever it is I want to do that day, I'll figure out something else. Okay. But we have to have really almost that dialogue. Okay. Well, I'm not listening to you today. And then that's how you reprogram it. Okay. That's how you reprogram the ego. So I think understanding, what are our views of ourselves, and how to do those views either serve or not serve, because some views serve well and some don't, right? And understanding what those views are that don't serve as well, and then how can I reprogram the ego, because the ego is programmable. That's what it does, right? Okay. And understanding what that is, right? When you're reinforcing something that is not healthy, okay, but it's reinforcing that, okay, that's your ego. And that's when you understand how ruthless your ego is about reinforcing things that really are not in your best interest, because you haven't told it it's not in it's your best interest. And it really requires you to do the programming. So along those lines, right, about how we see ourselves and our programming, right? Everything is created twice, once in our mind, once in reality. So everything we see, this computer, my coffee cup, I'm looking at Angela's glasses, I'm looking at the dishes behind her, all that, right? Everything is created once in the mind and then once in reality. Okay. Which also means that you can program things. So this is how you program your ego, right? You understand that this is a programming thing. And if I keep replacing language, right? If I keep replacing self-limiting language and self-limiting beliefs with positive language and positive beliefs, that's how I change the programming. So understanding that we create things in our mind, but whatever we create in our mind actually shows up in our world. Very, very powerful. So reality really is in our perspective on how we look at things, right? We can look at an image like this, and we can see things a couple different ways. I think it's kind of a cool image to demonstrate that. And so really, when we're looking at circumstances, it's really up to us to decipher and not just to default, okay, to either what our past thinking is or what our social group thinking is. And so reality lives in our perspectives, right? So we can look at ourselves in different ways, like like you're looking at these two chess pieces, okay? How do we see ourselves? We might see ourselves as we actually are. We might see ourselves as we want to be, okay? We might see ourselves in an increased manner, or we might see ourselves in a diminished manner. And really, we're the ones that have to basically understand that. We're the ones that have to be able to make those determinations so that we can change the programming, right? And for most of us, I think a lot of times we enter into these kind of default patterns because it's what we know and it's comfortable, okay? And the question is, comfortable is okay, right? Every now and then, right? But really nothing happens outside of our comfort zone. So it's really a matter of how we change our perspectives, and how we change our perspectives and then generates the reality. And the more often we do that, going all the way back to the synaptic connections that we talked about, I think in section 2, about the more often we think something, and the more often we have, let's say, a positive thought, okay? The more often we have it, the stronger the bond in that thought becomes. And if you take a look at the little bright spots here in between these neurons, that's a synaptic connection. It's called synaptic glue. And basically what it does is it bonds the neurons together, okay? So that the bond is tighter. And like when we talked about before in the other section about this, is that the more often you do something, good or bad, okay, healthy or unhealthy, all right, the stronger that bond is. That's one of the reasons why it takes 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks either to develop a habit or dissolve a habit, right? Because you're dissolving that bond in between those neurons. And every habit we have, no matter how large or small, is based on reinforcing it, doing it over and over again, and developing a synaptic connection. Okay, and so the more aware we are of that, even just like the average person has up to 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of them are the same. Well, you can't monitor 60,000 thoughts, right? We talked about this before, but you can monitor the ones that matter, and you can replace them, okay? You can catch them. And the more you catch them and the more you can replace them, okay, the weaker that bond becomes, okay, on thoughts you don't want, or the stronger that bond becomes for the thoughts that you do want, all right? And this is how we're wired. And so, catching ourselves is super important, because it's the only way that we start to change our belief systems, right? It's about our perspectives, and our perspectives create the world around us. So if you can see yourself as being successful, then your ego will reinforce an opposition of being successful. So we've talked about that. It's simple to change the programming, And I'm going to give you 6 simple steps on how to do that. So the first is you create a vision of what you want so that your vision can replace your programmed beliefs. You have to remember, all of our beliefs are programmed one way or the other, whether we got them from TV or our parents, or it doesn't matter. They're all programmed. So we're in charge of our programmed beliefs. So if we create a vision of what we want, if you go back to that mirror with the 2 chess pieces, right? We've got to create that vision for what we want. Be present and mindful of your thoughts so as they occur. Just so we were just talking about this, you literally remove the old beliefs and replace them with the new beliefs that match the vision you want. You literally remove one, put another one in. Emotions are very powerful, so we have to feel the vision. Okay. Most of the time, the words that people use don't get heard. It's the inflection in the voice, and it's the body language that resonates with people. It's typically not the words, right? And the inflection and body language all speak to feeling. So feel the vision you created. Just don't see it. The stronger you associate, okay, your feelings, okay, with that vision, okay, the more likely you are to be able to reach it. Make a plan to achieve the vision. Write it down, measure yourself against it. Okay, it doesn't need to be on a spreadsheet. It could be just on, it could just be on a journal or a notepad that you keep someplace close by, right? It could be 5 or 6, whatever the number is. And you're just you're just checking yourself against it. Okay, don't be afraid to hold yourself accountable. Next is review your plan with a friend or a family member and ask them to check in with you periodically. And it's like having an accountability buddy, right? You can say to your brother or your sister or a parent or a friend, hey, I'm doing this thing, and it's really important to me, and I need someone to check in with me every now and then. When you think about it, can you shoot me a text or give me a call, or when we're talking, can you just ask me how this thing's going? All right. And I need somebody on the outside to check in on me. And there's nothing weak about that. I mean, actually, weakness is hiding. Okay, strength is about doing things in the open. So there's nothing wrong with that, right? So you've got to make a plan for yourself, right? We've talked about in item 4. But item 5, enlist the help of your friends. They'll love to help you. Okay, whoever you trust, right? Could be a coworker. It doesn't matter who it is. Right? It could be a number of people. It doesn't have to be one. And then lastly is be kind to yourself. A lot of times, when we're on a journey for things and it gets a little tough or we get bored, right? Then, what happens is we get slippage and we take a week off, or we break from, better health habits, or I stop reading for a month, whatever it is, right? Whatever it is you're wanting to do, okay, or a number of things that you're wanting to do, and it's okay, and don't beat yourself up about it, because a lot of times when we have slippage in things, it actually serves to remind us. And I'm going to give you a personal example in just a minute. It actually serves to remind us about how important our goal is, right? And like I said, I just came off this sports injury, which I've had since July, the end of July. And it was really hard for me to keep going to the gym and doing certain things because frankly, it was painful. I was resting my body where, the parts where I needed to and all that, but it was still hard. And just this past week, getting back into a routine, a physical fitness routine. And I was so grateful yesterday morning. I'm like, wow, my body feels great, but I kind of had, in hindsight, I kind of had this injury. I learned a lot from it, right? About self-care. I did a lot of research about it. It was bicep tendonitis, about, how do you get it? How do you get rid of it? How do you keep it away? And, I'm really excited now. I got like a whole new routine. And I wouldn't have had that routine if I had not had this injury. So breaks are good. And what happens is that when we take a break, or we have, I call it slippage in something that we're working on, we tend to beat ourselves up. and then we tend not to go back. And that's pretty common. Everybody, I've done it, everybody's done it. And so it's okay to say, well, all right, you know what, I kind of fell out of routine here for a couple of weeks, but that's okay. And I'm going to get back at it, and or get back at it differently, right? And so, be kind to yourself. Don't let those moments where, those periods of time where, you've taken a break or you've gotten bored or whatever the case may be, don't let those weigh on you, um, because they're there for a reason. And a lot of it is to reinforce or to give you the opportunity to reevaluate what you're doing. And then lastly, we will leave with one of my favorite authors, lecturers, is a guy named Mike Dooley. He's retired, shouldn't say retired, but he was an accountant and then got into the business of helping other people. And his kind of signature quote is, "Thoughts become things." I think that's a good way to end this, because that's very true. All of our thoughts become things. So let's check our chats real quick. Yeah, thank you, Rita. Yep. Yeah, sorry about that. I forgot about the 401k meeting this morning. So, all right, any other chats people have? Well, this was fun. Thank you for spending the time with me on these 5, 5 steps, 5 parts into how we thrive outside of our comfort zone. It's one of my favorite topics, and I learn something and remind myself of something every time we do it. So, have a great week, and we'll see everybody next Monday. Take care.